Okay,
All right.
everybody. Thank you all for joining us for this guest lecture. Um, this right here is really special to me. Me and this gentleman, we used to work together back when I was a government contractor for the United States Army. I was a strength and conditioning coach. And part of that was, and me being a part of that program is part of the H2F Holistic Health and Fitness Program. And that was about promoting better or more quality fitness advice to the active military. And so with that led me to cross paths with a bunch of great and brilliant individuals, a part of the H2F program. And the H2F program I was a part of, I was stationed out of Joint Base Lewis and McChord, which is right outside of Tacoma, Washington. And the brigade that I was assigned to was the 555th Engineering Brigade, which was nicknamed as Triple Nickel up there. And part of that brigade, again, I was working with a lot of great individuals, not just from strength coaches, but athletic trainers, physical therapists. And one of those physical therapists who I had the pleasure of working with is this gentleman who is on our screen right here. This is Dr. Ian Anderson. He is a doctor of physical therapy. And I'm not just saying this because he's here. He is literally one of the coolest guys I know. Every chance he gets to be outside, he always has a chance to be outside. A very active individual when he's not in the clinic practicing his expertise. He's outside ripping up some slopes on a snowboard or probably doing some mountain biking or kayaking to some type of river, whatever it may be, man. He's like a real life action figure. I'll let him talk more about that. But without further ado, I'm gonna stop talking because you guys didn't come here to listen to me, and I'm gonna turn this over to Dr. Ian Anderson and let him talk to you a little more about his expertise and adventures. So, Dr. Anderson, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roche. You've always been Dr. Roche with your Cordero to me. I appreciate the introduction. Real life action here. That's cool, man. I'm gonna adopt that moniker. That feels good. Um, but I will say, first of all, I want to thank UNLV and the staff and faculty that's involved with the sport performance program for giving me this platform and the opportunity to speak with these students and be a little part of what shapes them to to do what they do. And then, Cordero, I thank you again for bringing me on board and thinking of me in this context, to be a part of this. And, for those of you who know Dr. O'Shea, you know how he operates. He's one of those people that just seems to quietly get into your corner and meet you where you are and develop those relationships, slowly over time. And, he'll always give you an opportunity to thrive. That's one of the reasons I really enjoy hanging out with him and being around him. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here and thinking of me in this context. So and then lastly, I want to thank all of you, the students and faculty that are here to listen to this, the people that are tuning in from outside. The only real things that we have of value to us are energy and time, So it means a lot to me that you would choose to spend some of yours here. I put a high value on my time and energy, and I would expect that all of you do the same. So it'll be my goal to make sure that at the end of this, we've both gotten something out of this that is worth the expenditure. All right. Um, so I'll give you a really brief kind of rundown on who I am, where I came from in terms of this whole physical therapy space and what I have to offer you, so that you know what types of questions you can ask, right? And what sort of information I may be able to put forth. Okay, and then from there, I'm going to keep that kind of short, and then we're gonna move on into getting you guys information and good stuff out of this conversation, right? Um, Hey Cordell, can you I've got no visual on the people in the room. Is there a way to turn that back on? I feel like I'm just talking to a blank screen. Oh, there we are. Oh, hey guys. Okay. I feel way more human now. That was weird for a second. I just didn't know if y'all just all ejected out of the classroom or whatnot, but okay. So anyway, who am I? As mentioned, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I worked for the military for the majority of my career in all different settings. I worked in the hospital proper. I worked as an inpatient physical therapist. I worked with special forces. I worked with TACPs. I worked with pilots. I've been embedded with brigades. I've worked in satellite clinics on the military installation. I've done all of that. From top to bottom, I've pretty much been in every setting that the military has to offer. Um, I also have worked on the civilian sector. I've been an acute neurorehabilitation therapist. I've worked in hospital towers. I've worked in surgical units. I've done some contract work for home health and skilled nursing facilities. I've covered the gamut. Um, this also is not my first career. I came into this late. I didn't even decide to go back and do physical therapy till I was 33 years old. So nobody do the math here on my age. But it's, I've been through a bunch of other things. I was a commercial fisherman in Alaska for 20 years. I had my own construction company and built houses for a long time. And I've taken experience from all of those things and pushed it forward into my, now tertiary career, which is, the physical therapy space. I did my undergraduate education at Gonzaga. I did kinesiology or, sports physiology, sports medicine, whatever you want to call it. It gets titled different things in different places, but it's all basically the same stuff. Okay. So I think that your program is similar to that. And you're coming from, at least those of you who are undergrad are coming from that same background. Those of you who are in your graduate space, then, you're a little closer to the finish line of what we're talking about here from a PT perspective. So that's who I am. That was my career path. It's kind of how I ended up here. You can, as we go on with this, you can certainly ask me more details about that stuff if you want, but this really isn't about me today. It's about getting you information, but that should give you a rounded scope of where I've come from and what questions I might be able to answer for you. Okay. So today we're going to work through this with a little bit of an analogy. As Cordero said, I'm always out doing stuff and I live my life through experiences and I take breaks for thinking time along the way, right? My most recent break was a river trip. I just got off the river a couple of days ago. Actually, I got all my gear is yard sailed out in the backyard drying out right now from that trip. It's that fresh, right? And so are there any boaters in the group, in the audience here, or people, chime in on the thing if you can? Any former river guys, whitewater, kayaking, any rafters, anybody? I guess y'all in Nevada, there's no water out there. A little bit, we got one. Okay, couple. All right, cool. So this analogy will ring true for you. And for those of you who have never done it, use your imagination here, okay? But being on the river and running a river and running a little bit of whitewater is in a lot of ways similar to kind of what you guys are going through in this phase of life right now. It's kind of always like life, if we're being honest, right? And the reason for that is that the river's always moving and you're a part of it, but you can either be along for the ride or you can navigate it to some degree, right? And with whitewater in particular, you got options. You can either run the river or the river can run you. And when the river runs you, you end up flipping boats and scattering your gear everywhere and going for a swim, and things get really chaotic and you get really reactionary and you just kind of have to deal with things as they come. And it can oftentimes be a little bit terrifying and not a great experience, right? The alternative of that is if you're running the river, it's a little bit more calculated. Things are planned out, right? The river runs fast and slow at the exact same time. When you're in the middle of a rapid, when you're pushing into something, once you've entered the tongue of the rapid and you're on your way, you're committed. Everything at that point is reacting. You've already made your decisions. You've already set yourself up and you're going for it. Okay. Right. But in the time and space before that, when the water's moving a little bit slower, that's where you have an opportunity to position yourself. You got a 14-foot oar rig. It doesn't move really quick. You got to think ahead. You got to read the water ahead of you and you move a little bit at a time. Put yourself in position so that you can execute that rapid successfully, right? Maybe a stretch of an analogy, but that's where my head's at these days, okay? And that's where you're at, right? Right now, you're in the slow water. This is the eddy right now. You've taken the opportunity to pull out into the eddy and you're gonna get out of the boat and go scout the river. And that's what I'm here for. I am the scout, for you to ask questions about what's coming. What are the things that are relevant to you that you want to know that are beyond where you are right now in this career field, in this job prospects, in the way that you make your money and the things that you're going to do and how you shape your career. You get to look ahead, okay? And so take this opportunity to scout what's coming and ask those questions now so that you're prepared once you're into the tongue and you're getting pulled into your career and you've already, committed your resources and your time and your effort, right? So with that, I'm going to kind of flip this on its head a little bit to get you guys engaged. I know the idea was me talk and then you give me questions at the end. But the reality is, if you don't have questions, I don't really have information for you. Not to be flippant about that, but that's just the truth, right? So we're going to start this off with a little bit of a prompt. Okay, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. That's for everybody that's listening here. If you're doing this in retro and you're listening in later, do this as an exercise for yourself. But I'm going to give you 60 seconds. And what I want you to do in that time frame is write down two things. One, I want you to write down your why. Why are you here? Okay. I don't mean in this Zoom call or in that seat that you're in right there. I mean, why are you at UNLV? Why are you pursuing the career that you're pursuing? And why are you listening to this conversation about future-proofing your next move, right? What is your why? Why are you choosing the path that you're on right now? And the second thing that I want you to write down in this 60 seconds is a question. What are you scouting right now? What is it that if you were on the riverbank, what do you need to know about your next move? I want you to write that down, because if you don't have a question, you're kind of just here, right? So I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I'm going to start the clock here in T-5, all right? And then we're going to resume and we'll come back to your why. Ready? Go. Okay. And we're back here, all right? Tidy that up a little bit as you're sitting here thinking through this stuff, okay? 60 seconds is pretty quick for those two big topics, all right? But the reality is, if you have premeditated this a little bit, you kind of know why you're here. It shouldn't be a hard thing to answer. If it is a hard thing to answer, you probably should spend some time with your why, okay? And the reason for this is that it's never too late to turn around, and it's never too late to portage around a particular rapid or whatever, okay, the case may be. And I think that's important to put out there as you are in this state right now. It's really easy to get the blinders on and be like, well, I'm in a program. I've committed to this, degree path, and these are my options, and I'm going physical therapy, or bust. And that's never the case. I went from fisherman to contractor to PT. Like, you can change however you want, but you need to make sure that that resonates with your why. So if you don't have a good why right now, either spend some more time with it or recognize that there is a contrast in what you're doing versus what you should be doing, right? Okay. Because everything that we do in our career and in our life, there needs to be a purpose that goes with it. That's the why. And then there's the doing of the thing. The doing of the thing requires its own gravity. It has action, money, time, effort, resources, all of that, right? You're going through this education program, you're paying for it, the opportunity cost of doing something else, you're away from your family, you're not in Minnesota or wherever it is, right? So you get it. There's a gravity to doing the thing, and then there's the reason for doing the thing. Those need to be proportionate, okay? If they're not, if there's this inequity in why you're doing something versus what it costs you to do or what you perceive the effort to be, then you probably need to analyze if you're on the right track. You don't want to end up in something that's purely by circumstance. Okay. So take a look at your why relative to the mass of doing the thing. Make sure that they're congruent, make sure that they're proportionate. Okay. So with that in mind, I want to get into some of the questions that you started to write down. And I know that this is way ahead of where we're going, but that will precipitate more conversation about what you want to hear from me. And I'll give you a little bit of prompts here, okay? So the gloves are off in this conversation. Cordero knows me pretty well. He wouldn't have invited me here if this was supposed to be an advertisement. You're going to get truths from me, okay? So this can be, the floor is open. Let's talk money. let's talk contract negotiations, job prospecting. What is it actually like to be a physical therapist? What's quality of life? What are the hours that you put in? What are the genres that you can work in? What's education costs, student loans? Is it relevant? Okay. What are the things that are actually on the forefront of your mind? Because I know if you're thinking it, the person that's sitting next to you is probably also thinking it and need to know it. Okay. And I know when I was in your seat, there's a lot of stuff that I really wish somebody would have been straightforward with me on before I ended up in this path and I'd figured it out on my own. Okay. This is the prep. This is setting the boat up for the rapids. You know what I mean? You don't want to be making these decisions once you're already in it. Okay. So send it. What have we got? Yes, sir.
So I'm about to graduate my degree in athletic training. I've taken my board exam. I feel good about the school aspect of things. Like I've never really had much of a problem with the textbook aspect. I feel like clinicals have gone pretty well. But just recently having conversations with preceptors and things like that, I feel like the jump up to full practice, to being a head athletic trainer, and having that responsibility and having a full caseload to myself and a patient load of my own, I feel like that's going to knock me on my ass a little bit. And there's going to be things that I'm not ready for or things I haven't thought of. So I'm looking if you can kind of help me scout, what's coming up that I haven't even thought of yet.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like the entry point of your career, going from being student to being fully practicing
Right, exactly.
autonomous provider.
What's the difference between when I tape some ankles and do some rehabs and make some decisions versus go with the full thing and everything's on me?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. And gosh, I have to step back. I love it. I have to step back a little bit and assimilate, put myself in that space again, because I've been doing this for a while. And some things do. Here's the comfort. Eventually, you get onto autopilot, man, and you're very comfortable in what you do. And it takes years to get there, but eventually, you will get there. I guarantee you. That anxiety, that entry level anxiety, and I'm not meaning entry level in your skill set necessarily. Although the reality is, look, let's just be honest. PT, AT, strength condition coach, it doesn't matter what you're doing. When you first get out there and you open the doors and you go into the realness of your career, you suck. Like it's just the way that it is. I was terrible for the first couple of years of my career, and the sooner you wrap your head around that and you start allowing yourself to be okay with that, the faster you're going to learn. So I think part of my answer to you is there isn't a way around it. That anxiety is going to be there and it's there for a reason. Okay. That's really a lead up to providing you some energy to learn the things that you need to learn. And there's an anxiety that's healthy to have in that space. It will help you to become more efficient, and you're going to get overwhelmed. You're definitely going to get overwhelmed. That's be careful who you surround yourself with. And be aware of whether your setting that you're in is nurturing you through that early phase of your career, or if it's just sapping your energy. Okay. And don't be afraid to pull the plug and make a change, move to a different space, or draw back and say, I need more mentorship or whatever it is. If you find yourself in a lead position and it's too much, recognize that. I'll give you an anecdote. When I was with the military, I was working in the hospital as an inpatient therapist for a while, and they pulled me out of there because they needed more outpatient help. I had a lot of sport performance and experience in that realm, and they wanted me with active duty population. So they moved me from the hospital. I was a contractor, couldn't say no to any of this stuff. I just had to do it. They moved me from the hospital out to a satellite clinic called a Kubo. And in a Kubo, this was pre-H2F, I was responsible for somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 soldiers. And I was one dude in a clinic about the size of my house. It was tiny. And that particular brigade, or those brigades that I was serving, a lot of them, their quality of life and their work-life balance is really poor. I had a lot of cooks, a lot of drivers, a lot of, the hardworking individuals of the military. And they have a tougher ride through than some of the ops individuals. What I didn't understand early in my career was that people that aren't in the right space in life and in their careers and in their head and in their agenda, they don't get better. We have to address their psychology first. You know this as budding ATC. If your athlete doesn't believe and they don't have the confidence that they can, operate on their injured limb or whatever it is, you're dead in the water, right? So I was struggling. I mean, I was coming in the clinic early. I was staying late. I was studying. I was putting extra energy into people. I was, pouring my heart out in these sessions to try to get people better, and people were not getting better. And I was just licking my wounds every day that I left work, and I was like getting depressed. And fortunately, at some point, one of my mentors, who's become one of my best friends now, recognized what was going on with me. And he came out there and started spending every day with me in the seat, right next to me, and eventually moved me back to the hospital to be a part of that outpatient clinic and put my office right next to his and put me under his wing. And he coached me up. And I was this close to quitting my job and going back to building houses and running a fishing boat. I didn't want to do it anymore. I just thought I was terrible at it, and that wasn't the case. I'm not terrible at it. I might not be the best out there, but I'm pretty good at what I do. And it just turns out that I didn't know the things I didn't know, and I didn't have the proper mentorship around me. I got put in a situation that was too big for the skill set that I had at the time, So I share that story a lot with new PTs and with people that are entering the career. PT, AT, strength coach, well, it's all a gray area. We all do the same stuff. Okay. So, let's not get hung up on semantics there. But I think when that hits you, everybody that's listening, and it will, at some point, you're going to run into a wall where you feel like you don't know what you're doing and you may be overwhelmed. When that happens, the best thing that you can do is say, this is normal. This is a phase of my growth in my career. And what about it do I need to change? Okay. For me, that was, I needed mentorship. I needed a little bit different environment, and I needed a patient population that was actually going to allow me to get traction with successful interactions. Right. And so once I realized that, we made those changes, boom, we were off and running. Then it was fun. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, or at least puts a little bit of light on it. There's no getting around the anxiety. Hold that anxiety. It's important for you. It's going to help you, right? And I have a little quote for you guys at the very end that's going to tie back into that a little bit. All right. So I'll try to ring that through to you, but just hold it, man. Go for it. You don't run the rapids without a little bit of anxiety. If you do, something's wrong. What else we got? Yes, sir.
So I'm a second year PT student about to go into their third year going to the clinicals. I absolutely love the PT profession. I know I enjoy working with people of like all demographics, whether it's old, athletic. I know I love that. My biggest anxiety towards the job is just almost reimbursement at this time.
Yeah.
I see my loans hitting over 100K by now.
Yeah.
And then I look at the job market going out, and a lot of it doesn't seem as high for the amount of work that you would get. And especially with the burnout rate for PT being, especially if you go to an outpatient clinic, you see 35 people a day, and then you get like $25 a person, and it's just like, well, what's the point? Did you ever feel like you hit that, like that anxiety of like, well, is it worth it money-wise? I know that it's gonna be worth it fulfillment wise for me, because when I did my clinicals, it was a blast.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate the financial side?
What a fantastic question. And I'm glad you threw that out there. That's brave, man, because everybody else in the room has the same, thing going on, and nobody wants to voice their concerns about it. So good on you for that. And it's true. Yes, I ran into the same situation. I was civilian sector. I ended up working for the military, but I was civilian, so I had to pay my way through my education. Fortunately, my undergrad was covered. But grad school, as you mentioned, you get to six figures pretty quick. And the job market doesn't necessarily pan that out. We have had like degree creep Right? Okay, now here's where the truth comes out. And there's, we're on a university platform right now. There's some stuff that maybe they don't necessarily want to hear, but the reality is there's been some degree creep, right? We've gone from a bachelor's to a master's to now a doctorate program. And there's been concurrent course load that goes along with that. There's been a concurrent increase in expenditure that goes along with that. And the salaries not necessarily keeping up, right? The practice pattern and scope of practice isn't necessarily keeping up with that. So that's a real thing. And I do advise people that are early, your second year, you're in it right now. You've already, you've been pulled into the tongue, you're in the whitewater, like we're going, okay? And I'm going to talk to you about how to manage that in your case. And for those of you that are slightly behind that and you're deciding what to do, the advice that I give people now is this. Physical therapy is fantastic. Is a wonderful career path. And if you Google search anything about PT, you don't need me to tell you this because you can Google this on Glassdoor. It's the fastest growing career field. There's jobs everywhere, blah, blah, blah. That's true. But the jobs that you want are not those. There's plenty of people that are just coasting and going through the motions. They can do those jobs. They can see 30 people a day and not get anybody better. That's not you. You're UNLV, right? You have some pride. That's why you're here. That's why you're in this conversation with me right now. They're not doing those extras. So there is an upper echelon, the upper 3-5% of those jobs. That's where you need to go if you want to not have that burnout. You don't need to see 30 people a day. That business model doesn't work for anyone except for the owners of those clinics. That's it. Nobody gets better that way. If those people are getting better in those 20-minute cookie cutter, how can we build the just right CPT codes to reimburse the clinic the most? If those people get better in that environment, they're going to get better anyway by doing nothing. They need a tincture of time. And all you did was buy them that and cost yourself a bunch of energy. Okay? So be judicious about the jobs that you will accept. Be careful with your energy, with your space. If you're entering physical therapy and you don't yet have that debt incurred, my advice would be, at least in this market today, if you can pull it off with less than arbitrary number here, but let's say somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 or $60,000 in debt, go for it. Send it. Okay? Because you can make that up and it's worth it. If you're not in that boat, if you don't have the funds to throw at education on the front end, you don't have some scholarship, you don't have some other program, then you need to evaluate whether or not you want to bookend yourself or coattail yourself onto this career path. Because if you finance the entire thing full out, you either need to get creative on the back end. That's where I'm going to talk to you specifically about what to do now that you're already in it, or you just bought yourself a career because your student loan payment is going to take such a chunk out of your salary that you could have done something way easier for the same quality of life. Okay. So be aware of that. If you're just entering, try to keep that cap down. What are some strategies for that? Well, you can go military. Military employs a ton of physical therapists. All right. And they have their own, you can go through the Army Baylor program, or you can actually commission after the fact when you have your doctorate already. And if you get with a medical recruiter, you can talk about reimbursement strategies that way in exchange for your time and commitment to service. Okay. So that's an option. Reserves and Guard have reimbursement options as well. They will give you a certain percentage toward your education. That's all handled in your recruitment process, but those are options. You also can, if you work for a federal system, okay, everybody knows about the PSLF program. Does anybody in the room not know what that is? Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. Okay, so those are federal jobs. They are rural or critical access jobs. They are Indian Health Services jobs, etc. Right? Most of you know what those are. But that's an avenue that you're going to want to explore if you're needing to manage that debt cap, or if you already have it and you're going into a career path. Okay. So in my career, I've mostly been federal. So that all qualified for PSLF, right? And now I'm transitioning into an administrative role where I'm going to be a director of rehab services for a hospital out in Oregon. I'm moving away from military back to civilian sector. But because I'm working for a critical access hospital that's in a rural region of Oregon, I still qualify for my PSLF. Okay. So with those things combined, that puts me on a trajectory where my salary is able to increase, my job prospect is able to increase. I'm kind of, by taking this admin position, honestly, kind of at the top of where you're going to be from a physical therapy perspective, unless you decide to open your own practice and do something unique. Director of rehab for a hospital is about as high as you can go. So I've been able to do that, and all the while been able to create a system that will pay back my student loans. Okay. So you need to do that. You absolutely have to think about the debt burden, and you have to learn. You need to know the rules about managing your student loan to a T, because your whole objective, even if you enter a PSLF program, your whole objective is to pay as little as you possibly can up to the point that they forgive the remainder, right? It's simple math. So you need to know the dates on when to do income revalidation when you're on an income-driven repayment plan, right? In your first 2 years of your employment, your salary is going to be lower just by nature of being an entry-level employee, right? So you want to maximize that. You want to know the dates on the calendar when you're absolutely mandated to reapply. And if you can do that, finagle some room around when you file your taxes for the next year, etc. You want to show as little income as you possibly can, because that dictates what your payment is. And all the while, you're racking up the years towards your 10-year forgiveness. Does that make sense? Okay. So you want to understand those rules really, really well, and they're deep. Honestly, it takes some time to sift through all that stuff. There's a ton of information out there. There are entire, Reddit just wormholes about how to manage this for doctors, physical therapists, ATCs, the gamut. Okay. And I think that understanding that it's not cheating the system, it's saving your butt. So you need to know how to do that stuff. And I would look for opportunities. I know early in my career, I was concerned a little bit about, hey, I don't want to sacrifice 4 years of my time to Indian Health Services and go live in Yuma or whatever. I didn't want to do that. But the time goes by no matter what. The river runs, whether you're, cooperating with it or not, it's going. And that 4 years goes by so fast. So, look at how you begin your career and what your strategy is going to be to get to the quality of life that you want, and start looking at that time block differently. Look at how fast your second year of PT school has gone by, and you're about in it. And when you were an undergrad thinking, hey, should I do this career? You're like, I don't know, man, 4 years. Do I really want to do another? Do I want to do this much before I get a paycheck? The time goes, man. It sends. So pick your strategy, see what you can tolerate, sacrifice on the front end, get yourself into a reimbursement program. Indian Health Services oftentimes will give you money on top of it being a PSLF. You can negotiate to where you get, $20,000 a year for 4 years of commitment, or it'll be a graduated tiered system where they give you $10,000 the first year, $20,000 the second, and $30,000 up to a total of $60,000 or whatever the number is. Okay. The temperature and landscape of this is always changing. And this is probably one of the most volatile times. We have a bunch of student loan conversation in litigation right now. So a lot of student loans are paused. If you're on an income-driven repayment plan, they're in an administrative forbearance and just in holding right now. And this changes literally week by week or day by day. So you have to stay clear and present with the news and understand how it affects you. And the management of those student loans on the back end, when you get out of your school and then actually goes to Muhila or whoever it is that's managing that, is absolute chaos. They are not going to handle it properly. They're going to fumble it all over the place. That's just the way that it is. So you have to mind your own P's and Q's. I have to monitor my debt all the time to make sure that they're following the rules on my behalf. That's kind of scary, but that is the reality of where we are right now. You have to watch it like a hawk, and you have to advocate for yourself. So know the rules, know how to access your stuff, know how to get a hold of these people. That's also very difficult. You have to be patient. You have to be willing to sit on hold. You have to do all this nonsense, and prepare yourself for that. That being said, it's not an absolute anchor. The debt that you have right now, coming out of PT school, you're going to be fine. You'll be fine, but you're going to need to be creative. You're going to need to seek those top end jobs. And you're going to want to have a plan from the beginning to get yourself into a program that's going to give you some money. So you can look at things like, I can't give you specifics, but look at Coast Guard, National Guard, Reserves, Army, Air Force, right? Navy, any of those things. Look at rural hospitals, look at Indian Health Services, and negotiate with employers that are in need. Anytime you're negotiating a contract, can they offer you anything to take the burden off of your student loans? Okay. Depending on the year, a lot of that stuff is tax-free. It can be added on as an add-on to your salary, right? Even if you're doing a contract thing with a non-PSLF related program, if you negotiate it properly, they may say, hey, well, we'll give you an extra $10,000 a year as student loan reimbursement, which means that you get that without a tax burden, and you can apply that straight to your student loans. It'll essentially cancel out the cost of you having to make those payments for that time that you're under contract, right? So you got to go in with guns a-blazing on that. You need to know the rules and you need to know what to ask, and don't be afraid to negotiate that stuff when you're in those employment terms. Don't be shy about what you need to make your quality of life and your salary make sense when you're getting into those negotiations. Okay. Good, really good question. Did I cover all of that for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, right on. Sir.
Kind of connecting to that, as far as entry level, what's the viability of doing either an LLC and opening your own cash pay services, or joining the cash pay clinic? I know that that's kind of where the market is shifting with growing frustration with third-party reimbursement. How does that play into an early job and trying to eliminate some of that debt?
Yeah. It's doable. I think everybody's circumstance is going to be a little bit different. The cash pay market is definitely growing. The viability of it is definitely growing. What people are willing to invest in is expanding. People are starting to think of their healthcare outside of the confines of their insurance-based providers. For access is hard to get. Quality of care in a lot of cases is down because of the stipulations that we have to go through, the hoops we have to jump through to get paid. And people want more, honestly. Those that have disposable income, they understand that you can be healthier. You don't have to be sick or broken to start healthcare. And that's where our model has kind of gotten off the rails a little bit. And that's where you guys are part of a profession that's flipping that script, right? We are preventive medicine in a lot of cases, or we should be. So that field is expanding, and those positions are out there. Going out on your own right off the bat, it depends on you as an individual, it depends on your background, it depends on your confidence, it depends on the circle of people that you're running with and your financial situation. The end goal is for you to succeed. And being chomping at the bit and knowing I want to work for myself, I was there, okay? I owned my fishing boat, I owned my permit, I owned my construction company. I worked for me. And then I came out of PT school and I was like, you want me to do, you're going to tell me when to be there and what I have to do? And I don't know if I get on with this. I was chomping at the bit immediately to work for myself. And in retrospect, I didn't. I got pulled in other directions. The river took me where it was going to go. And all of that for me was a blessing, because now fully equipped to do that. And I do work on the side doing, independent things and cash pay stuff. But I needed every bit of that time to hone some skills and to learn the business side of the industry that I was combating, right? If you want to go cash pay, you are the antithesis to the existing model, okay? You need to understand your enemy. You need to know exactly how it works so that you can form something that fills the gaps in what it doesn't have. You understand? So I'm not saying don't. You'll never hear me say don't do that. If that's really what's calling you and you have the resources to go and do it, send it, man. Worst thing that happens is you fold it up and you go back to work in a different avenue. But don't hamstring yourself. Make sure you don't crater to the point where you can't recover is all, But if you want to go for it, you can go for it. You'll learn what you need. You'll have to be stout about it, but you'll get what you need eventually. Okay. Same goes for things like they'll tell you with new grads, they'll say, hey, don't go be a contractor right off the bat. Don't do travel contracts right off the bat. Don't listen to all that. Go find the job that suits you and suits your needs and gives you the ability to manage your debt and give your lifestyle what you need. You'll learn just as fast. I took right out of the gate, I was a travel contractor. Very first thing I did before I even went military, I took travel contracts. And that was everybody said, no, 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 don't do that. You're not going to have mentorship. You're not going to get what you need. I learned everything that I needed to know, and I wouldn't do it any differently. I got paid more. There was a light at the end of the tunnel for me as a new grad, not knowing exactly what environment I wanted to be in. Signed on for a 3-month contract, 6-month contract, whatever. And I was like, all right, I can handle anything for this duration. I got to be in different hospitals. I got to be in different outpatient clinics. I got to be in different settings from neuro to, ICU. And I got to soak up all kinds of different sampling, and I got better along the way. And then I was able to enter into an avenue that I wanted to be in. So yeah, I hope that gives you some input. Cash pay is a real deal. It works. It's out there. There's a lot of people that are being successful with it. And even in my own metropolitan area, it's working really well. Some of my peers that have left the military are running cash pay clinics. And so if you want to do your own thing, do that. That space is available, but make sure that you really understand the business model that you're up against. We're holding on. We got about 15 more minutes here for you guys. What else can I answer for you? Yeah, what you got? Oh, I've lost audio. Can I?
Come closer.
His voice is a little hoarse.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, come on up and get right up to the mic there, bud.
Okay, so I'm a second-year undergrad student in
Okay.
and I've been juggling a few career options, physical therapy, athletic training, or some other career in the field. I was wondering, how do I choose my career, and when will I be confident that my choice is the right one for me? Like, what are some of the warning signs or the green flags that the career I choose is good for me or not? And when do I decide to stay in it or to leave?
Yeah. Cool. You said you're second year undergrad right now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So you still have a little bit of time. My first advice would be don't be in a rush. Okay. Just because you graduate doesn't mean that you need to go into the path that you're going to go to. Are you doing kinesiology or sports science or something of that nature? Okay. So with that genre, that's kind of where I came out, right? And I graduated and I looked at the job fields. I could go personal training, I could go strength and conditioning, upper level of that. I could go chiropractic, I could go physical therapy, I could go med school, you can go nursing, you can go PA, you can go nurse practitioner, right? Like any one of these kind of allied health systems, you can work your way into any one of those careers from the basis of your kinesiology degree. What your kines degree doesn't do for you, really, is allow you to operate with just that. You kind of got to go further, right? Like especially, if you have aspirations of having, good quality of life and a career that you are going to stay in, you're probably going to need to add to your kines degree. Unless you go research and science oriented, which is a possibility, you'll probably end up into a master's program, PhD program anyway. But you got to think next move. So my first advice is don't be in a rush. Graduate, find a job, do a thing, right? Don't worry about whether it's the right thing or not. And let yourself simmer on that a little bit. Okay, if you're unsure. The other thing is spend time with that why question that we put down. Okay. For you, it's a little bit, there may be multiple whys, and you may not have it tied to anything. But that psychology of understanding yourself and understanding what you really want to do is really important. I know when I was in physical therapy school, there was a couple of people in our program that backed out volitionally. One of them backed out in our third year. He was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And everybody around was like, I won't use his name, but everybody around was like, no, what are you doing? You're almost to the finish line. Like, why are you doing this? And in retrospect, I look at what he did and the conversations that I had with him in person. And he explained to me, he said, I've made it this far along and I realized I'm not good with people, man. Like, this isn't going to work. Why force that trend? So I'm not saying be flippant about it. I'm not saying be frivolous with your decision making. There is a time and a place where commitment to what you're doing and fulfilling that thing is absolutely the right thing to do. And you just have to stay on that track. And maybe you're the person that needs to finish out that third year and go ahead and do it, just to get that feather in your cap. But if that's not the case, if you're spending time with your own psychology and your own strengths and weaknesses and things like that, and you're recognizing you're on the wrong path, you have that why sitting there and it doesn't match the mass of doing the thing like we talked about, if they're really disproportionate, bro, pause, push pause, move. Don't be afraid to, like, this isn't for me. You're young, I made a career change at 30, big career change, right? It's okay to do. So when are you going to know that it's absolutely right for you? I don't know that we ever truly know. There's not like a light goes on in your head and you're like, this is what I'm meant to do. Maybe for some people. I think the reality is we're drawn to it a little bit slower by circumstance and by being honest with ourselves. But you want to have those conversations and you want to give yourself time to sample things. It's hard to pick a career path off of the prospects that is showing you on Google. Okay. That will lead you a bunch of propaganda and misinformation. And then you'll get into a situation and it won't be what you thought it was. Okay. So when you're done, go be an intern for a while, man. Get into a clinic, hang out with some PTs, go to different avenues, really learn what their life is like. Go hang out with a physician assistant, go hang out with a striker or Medtronics rep. Go hang wherever, whatever you need to explore all of those career options and hang out with them. Spend a year, 2 years, whatever. It doesn't really matter. How old are you? I didn't catch that. Can somebody echo that for me?
20.
20. My man, you got all the time in the world. Okay. So rest with that. Be easy with it. Finish your degree. Go and sample things. Don't worry about hitting the ball out of the park right away. Get your career started. And if you need to pivot. That's my advice. Okay. All right, guys. I think my audio seems to be getting a little choppy, but if anybody else has got more there. Yeah.
From my classmates, I have a short one and then probably a long one. I don't know which one you'd like to take.
I'll do anything, man. I'm here for you guys. I got nothing else on the docket. I'm here for you. So if this is still worth your time and energy, as we discussed from the beginning, then I'm here for it.
So I'll probably do the long one first because I'll give you some context. She's a second year PT student like me. She came into PT school. She wanted to do outpatient ortho. That was her dead set. That's what she wanted to do. Then she got interested in neuro PT. Then she got interested in inpatient PT, acute care, and now she's like, well, I can travel. And it feels like as she's getting into her third year, she doesn't know what she wants to do, and she's hitting that final plane of I'm gonna start a career here, and I have no idea what I want to do with my degree I'm gonna get in a year.
Mm-hmm.
You ever felt that way? And like, I guess advice for her.
Yeah. Wonderful question. What is her name?
Her name is Shit.
Okay. Well, good to hear the question from you. So here's the thing. That's an advantage to you, not a detriment. And again, the quote that I'm going to bring up later that's going to be relevant to your new ATC anxiety is going to be relevant for this exact conversation as well. Okay. And we'll talk about that at the end. But the fact that you have all of those options is an asset to you because physical therapy in any one genre is burnout city. You're going to move, you're going to shift and move, and you're going to need to for your own intellect, for your own development, for your own self-worth and energy. Every genre has its pros and cons. Okay. I think with a lot of us, when we're coming out of school, I would say the majority of physical therapists, at least those that are coming from an athletic background, we have this romantic idea of, I'm going to go work with professional sports. Talk to Dr. Roche about working in professional sports, right? He'll be able to tell you real quick that there's some drawbacks to that. We all want to work with athletes. We all want to, we want people running with parachutes on their backs and doing crazy, we want the Instagram stuff, right? That's cool. I loved working with special forces. That's the top end of the performance level. That's cool. But you start to realize that those aren't the people that need you. And what are you serving when you're working in that population? You're serving your ego. For this is the environment that I wanted to be in. I wanted to be surrounded by this astroturf. I wanted to be in this Exos facility. I wanted to be doing this high level stuff. That's serving your ego, but that's short lived. Then you go and transition. I moved over to an inpatient acute neuro rehab center. I did not want to do it. Didn't want to do it. The salary was good. I was setting myself up to manage the money situation. That's kind of what I talked about with you. And I had negotiated a good system, and it was a contract, so it was short term. And I was like, I can do this, and it fulfills the need of taking care of my finances. So I jumped into that, and I learned more from that stint of my career than possibly any other place. And I learned the gravity of helping people that really need you and their families. And like, there's nowhere in the physical therapy setting where your value is as explicitly forward as it is in a neuro inpatient rehab center. When you take somebody from unable to stand, unable to make eye contact, drooling on themselves, to 3-4 months later, they walk out of the hospital on a cane, like that's real business. Like, that makes you feel pretty good about yourself, and you really change somebody's life. So don't be afraid of the differences in setting. You can always change. Just because you begin a position, even if you're being cautious about your resume and you're like, I don't want to leave a job for 2 years or whatever, because it's not a contract position or it's not temp employment or something like that. Maybe you get yourself into a longer term employment, whatever. 2 years is barely enough to learn a particular setting. So as long as you're not making a rush decision that's not good for you and doesn't pay you enough and is going to burn you out by just running a cookie mill clinic, as long as you're not getting yourself wormholed into that, don't worry about it. Take a setting that fits your needs from a finance and quality of life standpoint and go learn it, and then you can change. Okay? So, and because I guarantee you're going to change anyway. You're not going to stay in one vein the whole time. You'll get bored with it, and you'll need something different anyway. And that's the beauty of physical therapy, is that we have all of those different genres to go to.
Like a minute behind on the recording, so she might say thank you in about a minute.
Totally fine. Yeah, totally fine. This, information's for her, not me. So, yeah, as long as she gets it. And Cordero will have contact information for me as well, so you guys can ping me more questions. I'm happy to, this is valuable stuff, and I'm not able to think ahead of all the. I can't necessarily assimilate and go back to where I was, where you guys are at. But being able to ask these questions is really, really, really important for the fluidity of your, career getting off the ground. So I'm here for that, and you'll be able to send more questions outside of this platform if need be. As long as you go through Cordell, go through Dr. Shea, and he'll funnel it to me. So, all right. If you guys, does anybody have any other questions that you want to put out there right now? Yeah.
Got time for one more. Go for
So, my roommate.
Okay. I just had a quick one. Like, you've grown up to a pretty high level. I'm sure you have your fingers on a lot of pulses. Like, you talked about the student loans being up in the air right now. Is there anything else you see, like, whether it's from a reimbursement perspective or just or any healthcare perspective, that's like big changes coming, like things to be aware of and things to watch out for in the field of PT, in the field of AT, like anything that's kind of on the forefront or that you're paying attention to and watching for change?
Absolutely. I think somewhat setting dependent. If you're working military, the ebb and flow of resources and programs is starkly related to administration changes. So, be that what it is. This is not a conversation about politics, but under certain administrations, there's different resources allocated to different programs. And so depending on where you are in that setting, are you working with retirees and dependents in the hospital, or are you working with active duty personnel that are going to be mission, oriented? Those two resource piles can flip-flop like overnight with administration changes. Okay. So the politics matter in that setting a little bit, or a lot of it. Doesn't mean that your job will go away. But it can if you are a contractor. And this is something we really didn't get into too much, but contractor versus federal employee. A lot of jobs for federal are contract labor because the government, for whatever reason, doesn't like to commit to things for being salaried people. They don't want to commit to owning an individual because there's a lot of perks to government work. And it's expensive to have somebody full-time government. So they will contract a lot of stuff. And health services are a lot of that. That's why, Dr. Roche was a contractor as a strength coach. Most of our ATCs, athletic trainers, were contractors. A lot of PTs are contract. I was one of them for a while. Versus a government schedule employee or GS employee where you are federally employed. Okay. When you are GS and federal employed, your job is pretty darn secure. They don't really go anywhere. And in order to relieve you, they have to offer you an equivalent pay scale position. You might end up wiping tables in a cafeteria, but you're going to remain a GS 13 if that's where you were at. They can't pull the rug out from under you. That being said, it's very difficult to get those jobs. If you're not prior service, spouse of active duty or active duty yourself, you're up against veterans preference and active duty preference to get those jobs. Okay. I applied 7 different times to move from contract to GS while I was working in the military setting. I was within the walls of the military setting as a contractor, and I was trying like crazy to get moved over to the GS side. It took me 7 different applications, and every single time I got ousted by somebody with spousal preference or veterans preference or some other thing that gave them points ahead of me. And it didn't necessarily mean that they were a better candidate. In some cases they were. I remember a few people they hired and I was like, that was a good hire. You pretty should have taken her, but a lot of times not. A lot of times they were not good. And that was a bummer for both our clinic and the hospital and the soldiers and everybody, but you can't get around it. So those two, if you're contract and there's an administration flip and you're in the side that the money pile gets decreased, you're likely going to be on the chopping block. Okay. And you need to know that ahead of time. You need to understand how to navigate that because every 9 to 12 months or so, you really need to be evaluating, do you have option B in your back pocket? If you're going to operate as a federal contractor, you always need to have a plan B ready to execute so that you can negotiate your contract and also so that if you get chopped, you can pick up where you left off, right? Because just because a contract is signed for 5 years with the military doesn't mean that it's there for 5 years. Okay, they renegotiate that stuff all the time. And that's for pretty much any federal position. So in that particular setting, that's what I would keep my eye on. Outside of the military and federal setting, practice scope, practice patterns in different states is something that, it's not the end of the world, but you kind of want to know where you're practicing and what the trend is, right? In Washington State, athletic trainer use is on the rise. They're starting to find positions in corporate wellness and things like that, right? So there's positions that were not originally touted as athletic trainer type positions, but those are opening up. They're expanding the horizon of that. The practice patterns are also expanding, where you're getting to be more like PT Chiro than on field, emergent medicine ATC only. Right. So knowing what your state politics are and which direction that's heading and who's lobbying against you. In Washington, Chiro has a massive lobbying ability here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when it comes to who's going to get a beneficial thing, is it going to be the PTs in Olympia, or is it going to be Chiro that wins that? A lot of times it doesn't go in our favor. So you got to keep that kind of stuff in mind, Yeah, but I don't see any major pitfalls. I don't see the industry drying up. I don't see salaries necessarily tanking. I do think there's a saturation factor that's happening right now. Physical therapy, athletic training, those you look at the expansion of the education programs, right? They're popping up everywhere. It was a handful of years ago, there weren't that many. You had to apply, you had to be ready to travel all over the country to go find a decent PT program. Now there's online programs that are completed in a total of 2 years, and their actual didactic experience time is like 3 months. You know, I don't know how you can do a job. Those are the ones that are going to fill the 35 patient a day clinic. Those people, like, that's going to be tough. I'm not saying there's not going to be some good ones that come out of there, but they're not going to have the same quality of, going through your clinical rotations and spending the time in the lab and being with, doing the cadaver dissections and like really a full on program. Like that's real deal. So, um, but there is going to be a saturation out there, and you're going to want to set yourself apart in the jobs that you're seeking, in the way that you negotiate, and what you expect out of your employment situation. Collectively, we set the tone for where we're going to be as a profession. And if we keep accepting jobs as new grads that are $60,000 a year with these weird profit sharing things with an outpatient clinic, and they run you into the muck, and they tell you that they're going to mentor you, or they tell you they're going to take you through a residency program or something, like that's nonsense. Don't take those jobs, because that's not sustainable for us in this career path. That has to change. That's the car salesman side of things, where those clinic owners and the demographics that they collect they're winning, and they're utilizing the practitioners at their mercy. So, be selective. Not everybody gets this information. I'm telling you, you're in the core group that gets this information about being selective about what you take, and don't settle for things that are just because it's a job and they're going to offer you a paycheck and you're a new grad. That doesn't mean that you have to be abused.
Cool. Hey, thank you for that, Dr. Anderson. We really appreciate you dropping gems as far
Yeah.
as like relating to career advice, and get this camera image just right. All right, beautiful. Yeah, relating to career advice and how to navigate in this world, because that's part of our initiative at the Sports Innovation Institute. We want to provide our students with that type of information. Of course, we get in all the generic stuff what comes in the textbook and everything. We learn about ATP and all these other systems, stuff like that. We know that, but as far as like the actual career gems, what people need to be aware of. And as you said at the beginning, it seems like a lot of people are like afraid to talk about it. I don't know why, because it's stuff that we all go through and things that our students and the new generation going on into the world need to be aware of. So we appreciate you with that. But before we go, a little fun period, rapid fire questions. So to begin with, I don't know if you brought it up, we just missed it, but could you please remind us, where are you from originally, or what do you consider home, I would say?
Originally, I was born and raised in Alaska, and that's what I consider home.
In Alaska. Nice. How long have you, not that, but how long have you been living in the Pacific Northwest?
I did a stint in Texas, short stint in Arizona, and a stint in Texas for high school. And then I tried to get back to the Pacific Northwest or Alaska as quickly as I could. That's why I ended up at Gonzaga. And then I was in and out of Alaska. I was still fishing at the time. So in the summer months, I was up there all the time anyway. So outside of about a 15-year winters in Texas, the rest of the time I've been Pacific Northwest or Alaska.
All right, beautiful. First rapid question. You are a grad of Gonzaga. In a 2-on-2 game, who wins? Jeremy Pargo and Chet Holmgren, or Jalen Suggs and Adam Morrison?
Suggs and Morrison. Morrison was cold, man. That dude, he had a different way of playing about him. I know Chet Holmgren is generational talent, and Pargo had athleticism like nobody could believe. But no, I got it in their college days. Okay, right? Not their pro careers, but you put them both in their Gonzaga uniforms. All four of those players. I'm going Suggs and Morrison all day.
Beautiful. All right, you've been in the Pacific Northwest area, the Seattle area specifically. That's where we got to know each other, but you're from Alaska. So, quick question. Would you rather see the Sonics back in Seattle, or would you rather see Alaska get a professional sports team?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Sonics in Seattle, no doubt, for two reasons. Number one, that was egregious to take the Sonics away from this population. And number two, professional sports had no business in Alaska. Flight's too far to get there to play any games, and people just be freezing anyway. So no, that's chronic cryotherapy up there. We're not even trying to do basketball. Although some really good players come out of Alaska, because in the wintertime they just become gym rats. But let's keep it pure up there, and we'll play the pro stuff down here.
Yeah, you guys did put out Trajan Lane, so that's
That's
lit.
right. Asking
Um,
sense.
next question. Summers in Seattle or summers in Alaska?
Alaska. Yep.
Okay. Last one. Is cereal or soup?
Soup. Soup all day, man. Because you can have gazpacho, you can do cold soups, you can do savory soups, you can do sweet soups, you can do meat or no, yeah, soup all day, man.
No, no, no. I'm asking, is cereal considered a soup?
Oh, I got you. No, absolutely
Okay.
not. No, I don't even think that cereal should be food most of the time. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah, man.
Oh,
Look, I want to give you a little bit, last little bit for the students to kind of chew on here, okay? And then I'll let y'all go. But you know, you brought up a good point about the margins of what it is to be in the career, and I would tell people your craft is going to define itself as you move on. You're going to get the mentorship. You're going to learn. You're doing the education program right now to get the meat of it. You're going to learn how to do your practice pattern. But what's going to set you apart and give you a more enjoyable career is to study the margins. You are a business professional. Understand interview skills, understand interpersonal relationships, understand psychology, understand the business side of the craft that you're in. Study your own headspace and understand what that's like to relate to people. Those are the things that are going to make you better, because at the end of the day, we do way more psychology than we do actual body work. So make sure that you're studying those things in the margins and you're spending time with that. That's going to give you a leg up, right? And then the last thing is the quote that I was kind of talking to you guys about. This was something that just came across my morning reading recently. And it is that there's a great deal of suffering and discomfort in our world that's derived not from the actual problems in our life and the things around us, but by the fictitious kind of fabrications of our own minds. Okay. And it's so true. If you think about this, if you think about the kinds of problems that keep you awake at night, you know, worrying about an assignment or a thing that you're behind on or a thing you're supposed to do. And then when you wake up and you actually take on that task and you start doing it, you realize this wasn't that big a deal. There was nothing like the monster that I created. So as you're moving forward in your career and you're going into these things, the decisions get bigger. The decisions get bigger and the stress that you will incur gets bigger. Start practicing now, having control of your mental noise versus the size of the actual problem, because you can't afford to borrow stress from yourself as you're going through this stuff and developing your career, right? So recognize that the majority of the discomfort and worry and suffering that you're putting out there about your career and about where you're going to go and what things are going to happen is up here. You learn to turn that off. That's how you're going to open the door to be able to make the big decisions and do the things that you're going to want to do that are going to put you at the highest point of your career. That's critical. Manage your own mind space.
awesome. Stay on after this for a little bit, Dr. Anderson. Everybody, please give Dr. Ian Anderson a hand for talking to us. That was great.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all's time.
Cool. Thank you for that. And for everybody who tuned in, appreciate you all. We'll go ahead and stop the recording now.